So it's been a bit of a weird week this week. Haven't been as creative as I would have liked to have been. Haven't really taken any photos either. It's just been a bit of like a meh week, you know, like very flat, no highs, no real lows, just flatness, you know. But also this feeling of like frustration and this feeling of spreading myself too thin, trying too many different things, trying to show up in a bunch of different places, right? Like I wrote a blog post about this, be a link down there somewhere. But you know, I said what I said last week. I said that I'm making these videos to document my process, even if the good days and the bad days, you know? So yeah, this is me showing up, documenting, even though the week hasn't been that great. Yeah, I think one of the core concepts has been spending too much time or too much energy on social media in a way that doesn't really fit with how my brain works. Been trying to like avoid scrolling too much, just sitting on these platforms, you know, just thumbing away. And also just feeling a bit drained, like reading content that I didn't really ask to see. There were some people that I followed for a long time, kind of discovered that values are not quite aligned with me, so that's been kind of tricky, reconciling some of that. It's been a sign to kind of say, hold on, take a minute, like step back a bit, don't have to be here. Obviously I can go back, but it's just a week to disengage, a week to try and get my brain back into something that is productive and healthy, I guess. In my blog post, I wrote about this like fragmentation across all these platforms. Like each one of these platforms demands their own type of presence and you have to show up differently to all of them. And I don't know, it's hard to find a platform where I just feel like I can actually just be myself and not feel overly judged or worried I'm going to say the wrong thing or whatever it is, you know. I find it kind of hard, and it's balancing this line of like showing up and promoting myself and being there and being part of a community versus, you know, just like getting on with my creative process and actually doing something kind of interesting with my life. So for those of you that don't know, I actually work on a platform, it's called Refrakt. I mentioned this in my last video. And the irony isn't lost on me that this feeling of fragmentation that I've been talking about is also being contributed to by Refrakt in a way, right? Like it's another platform, it's another place to go and put your work. It's another place to go and try and meet people. And it can be quite tiring and quite, I don't know, frustrating. Still think there's a desire for these places where there's, you know, a smaller, more genuine feeling to them, a more focused community of people that I actually care about and photos that I actually want to see. And, you know, I don't think I've found that yet. So there's a bunch of things that I actually would love in a platform that I feel don't quite hit the mark just yet, or I haven't found a good alternative basically. So I actually wrote a list of them down. The place to organize projects and work in progress, a place to share half-formed thoughts about those said projects, a place that's private and collaborative and less performative, a place that you don't have to constantly check for fear of missing out, and lastly, a place that leads to more real life connections, you know. I moved to Vancouver a year ago and there's tons of photographers here, but I haven't been able to find the right group of people that I want to hang out with and I want to go and take photos with and just talk about photography in like a slightly deeper sense and not just like bangers all day, you know. And I'm just not sure that a place like that exists today in a form that's easily approachable and easy to use and is also quite extensible and powerful in a way. So yeah, Refrakt today contributes too much to that fragmentation. I think because it's positioned almost like an alternative to Instagram, right? It's chronological feed, no ads, no algorithms, just bog standard photography at its core. And I think that serves a purpose, but you still have a ton of people showing up expecting it to behave the same way to Instagram and expecting to get a ton of engagement or gambling on the fact that because it's still quite a small, relatively unknown community, that it will be the next big thing, then they'll get tons of reach. And it just doesn't work like that. And it's not intended to be that. So it can kind of leave a bit of a weird taste in people's mouths. And also the way, because it's positioned like this, it makes it harder to be more intentional and to slow down, and where it's okay to not feel like, oh, I've got 25 notifications to check. you know? I do like that sense about it, but it is lacking in the sense that because it's just posts with images and series and stuff, it does just feel like another version of Instagram. Slightly more photo-centered Instagram, but still Instagram nonetheless. And I don't think that's the kind of platform that I want to build or want to be on going forward. So I've been building Refrakt over the last 2 years, and I've experimented with a lot of stuff. I mean, series was great. It was like one of the first features that I launched. Probably, I think it was still in the beta, but it was probably like 2 or 3 weeks after initial beta launch. Series was also launched, and it's gone through a couple of different iterations since then. And it's great. It's a place where you can just like dump a bunch of images, organize them the way you want them to be laid out, and present them in a nice way, you know? It's a nice collection of images, but the discoverability has been pretty lackluster. They're like a separate tab in the app. They're not integrated in your like daily feed, I guess. And it's meant that people aren't finding them as easy as they should. Another kind of example was collectives. Similar sort of idea to series, except collaborative. So you could create a collective for black and white photographers, and then there's a dedicated space where people can post black and white photography and talk about it. But it hasn't quite landed in the same way. Again, it's also kind of slightly hidden. Yeah, I think collectives is in this weird spot where the core idea is there. There's this sense of collaboration and like contributing to a feed together, but in its implementation, it's not really the best place that it could be. Also worked on photo contests, which are kind of interesting concept to me. I really liked the idea that brands could start to use Refrakt and kind of sponsor actual photographers, and then there's some value there. But again, contests don't really feel part of why I started Refrakt. They feel like a cool feature, but not the main thing. The idea was that you'd be able to create a contest, put up a prize, and then there'd be like an open public voting period for like a week where people could distribute allocated votes that they have amongst the images that they think best fit the brief of the contest. And it was kind of like a democratized way of running photo contests, but again, yeah, it just didn't feel like it was part of the core value prop of Refrakt. It just felt like a nice aside, you know? And then I guess the last real big thing that I worked on was trying to split out the API in a way that allowed me to easily build like mobile apps, like an iOS and Android app. It's like one of the most requested features of Refrakt. It's ironic because we say we're an app, right? Refrakt.app, but we don't actually have an app, an iOS or Android app. At the time, this decision was made because the web is accessible anywhere on any device. I could load up Refrakt on my TV and just start browsing if I want to. And it works great on my phone, but it also looks good on a desktop. And we didn't have to go through the headache of building out a native solution for both of those platforms. It's something I will do. It's just a lot of work to maintain and develop new features and stuff. And I'm kind of glad I didn't, because now I don't have the baggage of what Refrakt is today in this new idea that I've been thinking about for the next version of Refrakt. So I want to lean into this more smaller neighborhood feel that Refrakt currently has a lot more, and kind of set expectations accordingly. It's not going to be somewhere that you show up and get 100,000 followers. It's not like that. But it will be a place to find new groups of photographers and also work together to build interesting projects. I always remember Flickr groups really standing out to me. This was back in, I don't know, 2008 even, when I first got into photography. I was on Flickr all the time, and the groups were super helpful. I just feel like the Flickr UI is atrocious in 2025, and I would love to use it as a platform, but the kind of photography that's on there isn't necessarily the type of photography that I enjoy looking at or engaging with. And the thing that I valued at the time was the feedback in groups and being able to learn from each other. That is still something I would really like to bring into Refrakt. It just has to be done in the right way. I think towards the end of me using Flickr, a lot of those groups started to become quite toxic and not really places that were that encouraging. And I kind of want to be able to avoid that as much as possible. But, you know, I love things like Discord and Slack. There's a few photography groups that I'm part of on those platforms, and they're great. And they have this sense of the community aspect that I really like, but using Slack and Discord is not necessarily photography centered, you know. You can't really organize your work in a nice way. Presenting it has, you know, its limitations. And also sharing it outside of those spaces also has limitations. I can't easily share the things I've been posting in a Discord server out to the public without also reposting it to a bunch of different places, which I kind of want to avoid. So yeah, I've been spending my time this week instead of taking pictures, I've been spending it sat here, coding away on my laptop or at my desk. I'm trying to build out the back end of this new vision that I've had, this thing that I'm starting to hone in on a lot more. And the first thing to do is to get this back end working so that then I can start to build out the website, I can start to build out the mobile app, I can start to build out all these other experiences on top. This is kind of like the core structure of how the app is going to work. This new version is kind of more like Flickr meets Arena meets Discord. It's a place to curate the things you like, to work on projects with others, share behind the scenes stuff if you really want to. It's predominantly focused around smaller private spaces rather than a huge public thing that you post to. So that's quite a shift in perspective for someone who's already on Refrakt or is maybe looking at signing up. But I think this concept has a lot more power, a lot more flexibility, while also still being kind of community focused at its core. So it's based around this concept of spaces, and a space is kind of like a feed, like a photo feed with a chat. The chat is optional, you can turn it off if you want to, but this simple model actually extends quite nicely into a bunch of different types of things. So the feed itself can be manually sorted, so you can drag and drop images around. You could use this for things like portfolios or group projects, or it can be sorted by time, so it behaves more like a classic kind of chronological feed. This could be useful for like, you create a space for Vancouver photographers, and now there's just a general feed for people from Vancouver to share their images with other photographers also from Vancouver. You can add images and text to spaces, which is something that's kind of new, almost like Tumblr, in the sense that you can have text posts alongside images and stuff. Helps add a bit more context to a group of images. And there's also this thing that I'm exploring called stacks, which is kind of like a mini collection of those things together that you can share around. So they can show up in a feed directly, or they can be sent in a DM, for example. So images and text and stuff, the elements that you create, they can be in more than one space at a time, which is kind of powerful in the sense that I could have an image in my black and white portfolio, but then I could also have it in my local Vancouver community group. And the reference is always tied back to me. So if it shows up in a feed, if it's been curated by someone else into a nice public feed of street photography, for example, it'll always have my name underneath the image. The idea is that it becomes a lot more personal, right? I could start a space with a group of friends and we could use it as a way to keep up to date with what we're all doing as a group. And it starts to feel like I'm actually sending images and text to these people rather than just posting them out there for everyone to see. You become a lot more intentional with how you're sharing things, and I think that's a good thing. While still also having the option to post them to public spaces if you want to, but I think the primary use case is more around this group dynamic, small, personal, connected, you know? The thing I've been focusing on is the API, which is the back end basically. This API allows other services to talk to Refrakt, or also your own website. For example, you could generate an API key that has access to your spaces and your images. You could then display those publicly on your website with the same data. And I think that's kind of powerful. It's kind of like works really well for the base use case, but can also be extended to do other things, you know? This could also enable some third-party software, which is kind of interesting. There could be, for example, an event service that's built on Refrakt that uses the space and the people inside of it to organize events. Or you could have a public view of the data in the space that turns it into a nice, beautiful website, kind of like a zine or like a group show or an exhibition or something. It's really powerful when you start to think about photography platforms in that way. It's beneficial because this core experience remains centered around photography, the Refrakt app experience basically, but you can have all of these auxiliary services or these auxiliary views on top of the data that's powered by Refrakt to do interesting things, which I think is much more appealing to me than the current version of Refrakt. So that means the current version of Refrakt needs to go somewhere. Now, my current plan is to sunset the existing version of Refrakt. Now, that means different things to different people, but I honestly believe that this new direction is much better for the platform and also the ecosystem and the current state of photography online. And there's going to be some people that don't like that, and that's okay, because I think the type of person that wants to use Refrakt probably cares more about these community things than they do about publishing into the void, so to speak. I think there's still a large number of people out there that are craving those same things that I crave with a photography platform. And I hope that this new version kind of hits those things, you know, it meets that standard that I'm striving for. There'll be a way for you to migrate your existing posts and series to this new version of Refrakt, or you can just choose to start fresh if you want to. And then when the time is right, the current version of Refrakt will essentially be in read-only or archive mode. The posts and your content will still stay up unless you want to delete them too. But I think it's a nice way of preserving the current state of Refrakt as it is, as almost like a historical record of what the platform was at that time. But yeah, I'm excited about this, this new direction for Refrakt, and it's something I've been thinking about for a long time, probably a bit too long actually. The last 6 months to a year have been spent rewriting notes, trying out different ideas, and I think I'm finally landing on something that feels pretty good, and I'm excited about it. There's tons of stuff for me to do. It's just me building these things, so time is my biggest enemy. I used to work full-time and had barely any time to actually start building on Refrakt, but I'm back freelance again now. This gives me a few more extra days in the week. So yeah, there's tons to do. It's actually pretty close to being done, probably another like month even. I don't want to say too much straight away because I'm also very aware that things change quite a lot. So my goal is within a month, there's some public API that's available for people to start playing around with. And then shortly after that, there's a web experience. That's the easiest for me to just get up and running, followed by a mobile app and stuff after that. It's gonna be fun, and I'm gonna try and bring you along while I'm doing this so it feels less like I'm just building this on my own in my own little world, and yeah, try and maybe see some behind the scenes stuff of how I work. I don't know if it's interesting to you or not. If you have ideas or you have thoughts, concerns, or general feelings about Refrakt and this new direction, then yeah, just let me know. I'm always available via email. All the comments down here are actually really good for me. But yeah, I just wanted to document my week. Hasn't been amazing, but you know, it's life, I think. So yeah, also some housekeeping stuff. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's subscribed so far and liked the videos. It actually does help a lot. It's a trope of YouTube, but that's how your videos are shown to other people. So yeah, I really appreciate it, and it means a lot to me that there's people watching these videos and finding some value in them. I've had a few emails that I still need to get back to, apologies, and some really nice messages, you know, and it's been great. It's very motivating. It's very just like a nice, good feeling that people actually care about the things that I have to say. But yeah, that's it. See you next week. Peace.